This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution once again. I am here with someone I saw and interviewed just before everything went kind of apeshit in the world. I'm here with Brad Ray, winemaker from Zonte's Footstep in McLaren, Vale, Australia. How are you today, sir?
We're doing good down here. We're doing okay. You know, it's a new world. It's a new common everything, and yeah, we're finding our space.
Well, the last time I had that candlelit romantic interview with you, I had just gotten to the point where I wasn't shaking hands with anyone anymore, and we were talking about we were talking about the contagion to come, and I can remember saying to you as you left my home, I said we'll talk about this in a few months and see where we're at. So here we are.
It's like I was on the cusp of the wave too, you know, because
that's right.
I left Washington, D.C., and it was sort of like that's where they had their outbreak. And then I went to Western Canada, and it sort of happened there. And as I left Toronto on Saturday, it was literally you guys were starting to, you know, the news there. So literally where I went around the world, I sort of rode that wave until I missed Pro Wine and made it back to Australia in my N95 and had to isolate 14 days. And yeah.
So for those people who don't know exactly where McLaren Vale is, would you mind explaining that in regards to the geography of Australia, and then talk about how this pandemic has impacted your country?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at Australia, it looks like a big sort of kidney bean. So at the bottom of the kidney bean, or the cashew, is what we call the Great Bight. That is basically the inlet and the two gulfs that are South Australia. So Western Australia on the left, New South Wales and Queensland on the east coast, Victoria's at the bottom, and we're in the Bight. And it's sort of in the epicenter, down to the bottom of Australia. We're the fruit basket of Australia. Adelaide's the fourth largest city in Australia at the moment. So, you know, if you take Sydney and Melbourne out of the picture, that's most probably 70% of our population mass. And then the other 30% is Brisbane, Perth, Tasmania, and us. We are, from a Canadian standpoint, we're a bit bigger than Calgary.
Right.
In population, and the same sort of spread. So very suburban, long stretching sort of city. And we are quiet. We only open up Friday nights in the city. Other than that, stores shut down at 6 p.m. It's night time. It's very 1970s still in Australia, South Australia, for trading hours. So we're the epicenter of fruit, vegetables, large scale farming, and obviously close to, and I don't know the exact figure, but we are the major state for producing wine. You know, most of the wine comes out of here. I always joke about the fact that if you walk into a pub or a restaurant here and say, is anyone a winemaker? Everyone puts up their hand except the bartender. So
gotcha.
It's, you know, it's a pretty common thing. It would be like walking into Calgary and asking if someone was in the oil business.
Yeah, of course. maybe less so these days, but
yeah. Well, we won't go there.
No, not in this conversation anyway. So how did the pandemic impact Australia as a whole, and then your region in particular?
Yeah, okay. So when the pandemic hit, Australia was very quick to react. So we shut down for 6 weeks immediately. And our numbers never really hit anything close to what we have back home in Canada, or, you know, God forbid, like the US or some of the European countries, the UK, nothing remotely close. So we have been blessed by that. I mean, by our isolation, it was very small, very, very small figures. You know, God forbid, you know, people have lost their lives in this. It's not a, you know, it sends shivers up my back talking about this. And the government's very vigilant in regards to how we're handling this.
So you're satisfied. Sorry, I'm talking over the top of you there.
No.
You are satisfied with the way the Australian government has managed this whole thing?
I have to say I wouldn't want to be in any other country.
Right.
Except New Zealand.
I was about to point that out. But yes.
Rather be New Zealand.
Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah. I mean, Jacinda Ardern, they had less breakouts. She was much more quick to react.
Yeah.
Like even faster than Australia. So their lockdown period was lessened. And they haven't had a second spike come through. So, they've been very blessed about what's happened and how they've done it. She's been very well, because there's not state government and federal government in New Zealand. It was very much one point of control, one communication point.
Yeah.
Whereas in Australia, we're like Canada. We've got states, and each state has a state government. So the quarantine and all that comes from a state-based impact first, and then the federal government afterwards.
Right, I get you.
So like Canada, you've got the federal legislation, and then you've got the state legislation. So each of our shutdowns have been enacted on by the states first and foremost. So there's a bit of confusion of communication, and Bob said this and ScoMo said that, and it was a little bit like that. But honestly, I think as a country, we've been very blessed about it. It's been hard. It's impacted our economy. I mean, we escaped the GFC, really, from an Australian standpoint. We really didn't get impacted by it that much. This has been pretty harsh. So,
how has it impacted things for you sales-wise at Zonte's Footstep?
Well, it's actually from Australia. We can send wine direct to customer in Australia. So we've always had very strong, in Australia, direct mail is very strong for wineries and from multiple areas. So what we saw was a huge spike in alcohol sales, like in Canada, except in a different way. A lot of people bought direct from wineries. So we, as an industry, haven't suffered that much. So, I mean, we've had a lot of small producers that have, because they didn't have a database or they didn't have a way out. So for us, I can only speak from Zonte's, we've come out of this to this point fairly unscathed. I've retained all my staff thanks to our JobKeeper, where the government gives us a monthly subsidy up until September to help maintain our staff. So we've retained all our staffing. But there's a lot of my mates that are smaller and newer wine businesses that haven't survived.
So please excuse my.
If you look at South Australia, sorry, Jamie, like we talked about in the last interview, we've had 4 years of drought.
Yeah.
Then we've had the fires in South Australia, and then the mega fire across Victoria and New South Wales. We've had three big things, and then the pandemic hit. That's actually been out of those three things, I'd say it's the most least impactful on our business, but still an impact.
Now, please excuse my ignorance here, but how severe was your lockdown? And, were restaurants closed? Were schools closed? All of that. Yeah. Okay. So
identical to what you guys did.
Right. So how much of your business is restaurants? Because, there are all these wineries across the world who are very, very proud of the fact that their wines are only really sold in restaurants. And then they're really buggered when something like this happens, right?
We're only about 20% of our business is restaurant on-premise sales. Most of our sales are retail, direct to customer. It's state by state very different. Like in New South Wales, we don't sell in restaurants at all because we're not expensive enough. We're not quirky enough for them. In Queensland, we have a very large restaurant on-premise based business. We're most probably 50-50 up there.
Right.
So the different mix. But from an overall perspective, our business, through our distribution, we export to 15 countries. Your hometown, the LCBO is one of our biggest customers. I guess that's because as an expat Canadian, I actually have a Canadian palate, and my wines suit the expressions, and it's just a real simpatico fit, I guess. And we don't sell in general list because we're not that kind of winery. We're a hands-on small family wine business that tries to look after our vineyards and express the fruit we grow. And so for us, the restaurant sales impacted some of our distributors. Our Western Australian business, very isolated in a country sense. It's very odd. Western Australia, the city of Perth is the capital. It's the largest state by landmass, and it's the most isolated city in any country in the world. So it's actually closer to Bali than it is to any other Australian city outside WA. So very isolated in regards to what happened with the pandemic. It had an outbreak. They curbed it very quickly. They shut down for, I think, 3 weeks, and then they went back to normalcy.
Interesting.
But our distributor there hasn't bounced back from it. He's had lots of his restaurants shut down because the pandemic was just the cherry on top of that sundae. We've had a downturn in what their business is out there, which is mining.
Of course.
And they had a big boom. And then with the China fallout, with the politics, they've had it stalemated about 18 months ago. And then the pandemic was just someone sliding that cherry, that last little bit on top of the cake. And it, lots of restaurant closures. I'd say I think restaurant closures over there, when I last talked to Simon, said that there was about 60% of the restaurants are shut and not reopening. So get loads.
Sobering thought there. Now, a reasonable part of your business goes through your cellar door sales. And I know it's early in the morning for you, but your tasting bar looks pretty empty right now. No, you must have had to adjust how you're doing the sales through cellar door, right?
Absolutely. So most of us have taken this as an opportunity to change what we do. In Australia, it was very common to just walk into a cellar door and have a tasting.
Yeah.
And usually not charged for. That sort of charging for tastings changed over the last couple of years with a lot of producers. Now everybody's doing it by bookings. So you book in for your tasting. The place is cleaned. So what we have become is as a winemaker educated in Australia, which is very chemical and very scientific, and then we have gone back to that lab stasis.
Right.
For me, it's very common to clean everything down. Surfaces are wiped down, the glasses are all rewashed. We use high temperature glass washers. We have to wipe down all the handles, tabletops, everything gets redone. Menus, unless they're disposable, have to be wiped down and laminated. And that's after every human being. So we've actually gone to booking dinners. So our place is only licensed for 80 people at most. So what we do is we're by appointment only from Monday till Thursday. We're not open Sundays. That's his day of rest and my day to get out in the vineyard and do what I need to do. And we're usually only open up Fridays and Saturdays, and we cater to the local market too. So we have like live music on Friday nights, and we have pop-ups where we used to do pizza one night Friday and paella on another Friday, and then Thai on the next Friday, and just mix it up because we're the only real restaurant bar type thing in McLaren Flat. We have a couple other wineries that have restaurants that are sit down degustation style, but we're the only casual sort of pop in place.
It's interesting because it must be a double-edged sword, because you're going to get less people through your tasting bar, but with all of the care and attention and the by appointment only thing, people will almost feel obliged to buy cases and cases of stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, from our experience, when we first opened up the General, so it's called the General Wine Bar. It used to be the General Store before we actually adapted it. We used to just have walk-in, and when we went to by appointment only, and we call it by appointment only, but it's Monday to Thursday, we're at our offices on the vineyard, which are literally a
Right.
2-minute drive away.
Yep, yep.
So literally someone walks it up and phones us, and we come up and open up the general, and we sit down. It's like with you. The way I describe the general is exactly what we did when you and I were together.
Yep.
We sit around our kitchen table and we have a discussion and we talk about wine. And it's about connecting with me as a producer. You know, if I'm around and I'm available, I'll go up and do these tastes. I want to contact my consumers. I want them to have that hand experience with me and not just my staff. We have 11 staff. 5 of them are core in our office, and they all know the wines intimately. I blend them with them. When I come with the wines out of the back that I'm blending, they get to see the evolution of how I'm working with those things. So everyone's very much connected. It's a really bad business model because we're quite flat-lined. There's not a real hierarchy. Everyone does everything. So, I mean, that's a bit of a leveling factor for us, but I want to keep everyone very connected and very much owned of our product and what we make. You know, they need to have that intimate connection about what we do. I make them come out to my family vineyard and prune every year, so they understand what pruning is and how we actually do it, why we use certain techniques. And it's our story. So we need to make sure that that's connected. And what's happened with this pandemic is people feel safer in their own group. Yeah. So they can book in. There's no limit on numbers. You know, for dinners, we actually do catered dinners now. So a minimum of 10 people, and we'll cook you a 3-course meal with wines for $120 a head. And it's yours, the whole restaurant. And we theme those. So we actually call them wine flights. So you can book business class, first class, or economy. And with those, there's different wines. I take one. If you're first class, you get a current release plus a 10-year-old museum wine. So you get 6 wines with first class. I think that's $150 a head with 4 courses.
That's Australian dollars.
That value. You know?
How does that? What's the conversion rate right now? Australian dollars to Canadian? Really?
Pennies off.
Okay.
Pennies off. Okay. Differences for us is we've got a very our wages here. So the reason we're also closed on Sundays is cellar door staff get $45 an hour on Sundays.
Oh boy. Okay.
Oh boy. Yeah. So we have a very fixed rate of pay. So yeah. And salaries here are elevated. So everything's a lot more expensive.
Now, I will be publishing this interview probably tomorrow. So to keep it kind of current, you've just had a little cluster go off in Melbourne. So Melbourne is currently under lockdown. What's the story there?
So that so I'm not a politician, I'm not fully connected to it, but the story that I've seen and heard and got from multiple different levels is what happened was a lot of people, we had flights starting coming back in. So we were bringing back expats or dual citizens back into the country. And they had to go into a 14-day lockdown. And what happened was the security company that was actually looking after and making sure that the people stayed in their lockdown, they weren't doing their job. And they were actually taking people to McDonald's. And they were, how can you say, cohabitating with them and then going home. And
that's a polite way to put it. Okay, that's okay.
So, you know, there's that happening, and then what happened was they've had little spikes of breakouts, and they can't really identify what it's from. It's not from schools. It's not from public arenas. I mean, in South Australia, we've gone back. All our nightclubs have shut down.
Yeah.
Because we opened up everything to normalcy on Friday, and then the younger crew here went a little bit haywire and blew off some steam. And, you know, we had nightclubs that were going till 4 a.m. and they were shoulder to shoulder. And so our state, you know, the head of the state basically said, no more nightclubs.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, that will be one of the very last sectors to come back, to be quite honest.
So Aussie Rules football, when we started playing again, they allowed the clubs to start to play. There was no crowds allowed. So there was empty stadiums, and they broadcast the game, and it was very animated and plastic. watching them run around. It brought back, it literally made me feel like I was back watching my son play soccer at 6 years of age. You know, you're going, it's sport, but really,
yeah, without the crowd, I can imagine.
Yeah. So now what's happened is they do a lottery, and there's segmenting of 2 meters between seats of groups of people. So if you're within a household, there'll be like 2 to 4 people, and then 2 meters all the way around them. And they've got blocked off areas. Like in the restaurants, there's a 2 meter rule between tables in your seatings in Australia or South Australia. With our restaurants, we have to be 2 meters away from the next table.
I honestly don't understand how that can work financially.
It's not about a finance, Jamie. In my mind, it's they're trying to get some normalcy back.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of, you have a choice. There's zero income or a little bit of income. So you have a choice. Do you want none or a little? And that's the choice it's at the moment. You know, it's, I don't know what the figure is. I remember looking at the news and seeing America, like it's $1.8 billion a day that it's costing the government of California with the lockdown.
Yeah.
Like that's a huge debt load for all of us, you know, because we're going to end up paying those debts back to the government. You know, we've got our job keeper here, which is a blessing, but, you know, we're going to have to reimburse that at some stage.
It's like generations ahead of us are going to be in this debt, right? It's
yeah. I mean, my generation in Australia, we have no, like you guys have an RRSP fund and a government pension. In Australia, my age group, no pension. The age group before us, the older group above us, because of their population mass, they used all that up. It's gone. There's no pension left. So
on a closing, brighter note.
Yes. Much brighter note.
What is the most valuable lesson that you have learned from the pandemic? Whether it's something you've experienced, something you've witnessed, or just something you've learned about yourself or humankind.
Oh, here, it's going to get all soft and gushy. I got tears in my eyes.
That's fine.
I've learned to slow down and really appreciate the people that I have around me, not only my staff, my family, and balance life a little bit more. I mean, this business, the wine business, is a 7-day-a-week, 24/7. It's agriculture. It's basically farming with a whole bunch of extended crap put on top of it, and it's time consuming. So I've learned to really sit back and appreciate the time with my people, my loved ones, my family, and connect. I've learned to do a lot of this, a lot of Zoom. We Zoom everybody. I mean, the one thing I've learned is I don't have to get on an airplane and fly around to connect to people. We did use a lot of video connection prior, but now I do this most probably 3 or 4 times a week, Jamie, with our distributors and importers. I do tastings from Singapore to Calgary to Glasgow in the last week.
I have to say, Brad, I've been writing about this. If there's one thing that I miss about the way life was before, it is tasting with my peers, because tasting online, I'm sure there's something pheromonal or something, there's a certain visceral interaction that just doesn't happen visually. And I've spoken to some winemakers, they've spoken about doing virtual blending sessions, and it just didn't work at all. No. And I think there's something that we don't know about concerning human interactions, especially when it comes to the sensory. So I really miss tasting with my friends and my peers. That's the thing I miss the most about normality.
I have to agree with you 100% on that. That analogy of watching football when you're at the game or an ice hockey game.
Yeah.
You know, when you're at an ice hockey game, you watch it, it's that added connection that you have to the people around you and the interaction with the actual sport. And it's the same thing with wine to me. It's that connection when somebody sits down with me and we talk and taste wine. I agree. I think there's a chemistry, an electric exchange.
Yeah, I agree.
Connection that we get, that we have either heightened mutual excitement about that experience of the tasting, and you see things differently. I think we unlock more when we actually have like-minded people around food and wine. I mean, that's part of what I love. My ethos is to sit around a table and share wine and food with people that I want to be with. That's that's my enjoyment place in life. That's what I like doing.
We shall get back there, Brad. We shall get back there.
Sounds good.
There you go.
There we go.
Hey,
perfect.
Thank you very much for your time this morning for you,
likewise.
this evening for me. We should do this more often, and stay safe out there.
You too, my man. Be safe, be well, be positive.
Always, always.